mynews.studio.
A youth orchestra once silenced by Taliban rule now fills Carnegie Hall. The question is, how did music survive when almost everything else was under threat?
Today is August 23rd, 2025. Let's start at the beginning. After decades of war and the Taliban's first ban on music, Dr. Ahmad Nasser Sarmast founded the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Kabul in 2010. Why was this such a big deal?
It was the only music school in Afghanistan at the time. Its real uniqueness was in who it welcomed: children from all backgrounds, including orphans, street children, and crucially, girls. They could study both Afghan traditional and Western classical music. This sort of access, especially for girls, just hadn't been possible for years.
And the Afghan Youth Orchestra came out of this, right? They went on to perform at places like Carnegie Hall and the Kennedy Center. But then, what happened in 2021?
Everything changed in August 2021 when the Taliban returned. Music was banned again. Schools closed, instruments destroyed, and girls were no longer allowed to study beyond 6th grade. Suddenly, students, teachers, and their families were at risk.
So how did they leave? What happened next?
There was a coordinated rescue. The entire Annam community managed to flee and found asylum in Portugal. Portugal was the only country that stepped in. Even after the trauma and displacement, the Afghan Youth Orchestra continued. They started over in Braga, Portugal, rehearsing again, touring internationally. Their commitment to Afghanistan's musical heritage kept them going.
How did starting over in Portugal shape the orchestra and its members?
Living in Portugal opened new doors. They played for different audiences, worked with groups like the Jovem Orchestra Portuguesa. Their music evolved. Now they blend Afghan instruments with symphonic arrangements, mixing folk music and classical pieces. The experience of fleeing, rebuilding, and performing abroad made them more resilient. It also gave them a new sense of purpose. They now see themselves as cultural ambassadors for Afghanistan.
And the female musicians? Back in Afghanistan, their involvement was already a major breakthrough, wasn't it?
Absolutely. In Afghanistan, girls in the orchestra challenged decades of bans and cultural restrictions. Some were the first in their families to learn music in 30 years. The Afghan Women's Orchestra, called Zora, was even created to give them a platform as performers and leaders. In exile, these musicians still take the stage, sometimes leading entire ensembles at places like Carnegie Hall, continuing to challenge gender norms and inspiring Afghan women and girls everywhere.
Their presence on international stages has changed the conversation about Afghan refugees and artists. What impact has their advocacy had?
Their performances at the UN Human Rights Council, Carnegie Hall, and throughout Europe have drawn global attention to the suppression of music and women's rights under the Taliban. Their advocacy has led to overturned visa denials, calls for protection of artistic freedom, and more support for Afghan refugees and cultural preservation. Each concert is in itself an act of diplomacy and quiet resistance.
Why does their story matter for people outside Afghanistan?
The orchestra's journey shows that art can heal, resist, and connect people across cultures. In times when censorship and authoritarianism threaten artistic freedom, their resilience provides hope and a kind of blueprint for using music to foster understanding and empower young people everywhere.
So from a ban on music to standing ovations at Carnegie Hall, they've become more than just musicians. They're now symbols of hope and resistance.
Exactly. Their survival and growth prove that creativity and solidarity can outlast oppression. This is about more than music. It's about the unstoppable drive for expression and freedom.
That brings us back to our first question. How did music survive when everything else was threatened? The answer is clear. They simply refused to be silenced.
Thank you for joining us and for reflecting with us today on the power of music, hope, and resilience.
This episode was powered by mynews.studio. Try it now for free.